Sorry about that. So we're going to start with A. The first thing we call is A, and we say print A starts. Then we're going to call the B function. So then it goes down to B. If we look at this, this is going to be the outcome. So the idea is that you don't want to call a bunch of nested functions because it's got to execute all the command out of there. Then it executes this function, comes back, executes any remaining code, and then goes either returns or back to another function. So just be careful when you call functions within functions that you don't get way nested deep into your program. If you're starting to get weird output from your functions that you weren't expecting, it's probably because you nested somewhere and you got some extra text hanging in there somewhere. It's pretty common when people get to their midterm projects that way. All right. We discussed a little bit on local scope and global scope. Remember, local is the stuff that's inside a function, and it can only be called inside a function. Global can be accessed from outside the function, and you can do that. So local variables cannot be used in the global scope. We talked about that and showed that. Local scopes cannot use variables in other local scopes. So for example, if I had two functions in here, I have add 10 years. If I had another one called def add 20 years, I cannot call age from this age in this function. If I define age, it's going to define its own variable age inside this function only. So you cannot call from other functions inside of there. Okay. Global variables can be read from the local scope, which is what we did when we showed this, right? So if I say print my age, it's going to print this one that we defined out here globally. If I want to change my age, instead of returning a value and just update my age, then I need to define what's called the global variable. So I come in here and say global my age. So I got to use the global keyword, and then I got to define which global variable I want to use. Now that I pulled my age in here, I can manipulate it directly. So I can just say my age is a result of age plus 10. Now I updated this outside variable to whatever it was. So you can define those, but you got to define global. This is a key part. This will be used on your midterm. This will be on probably your quiz. So pay attention and understand global and local variables. If I want to use my age, I have to say global my age. I can't just say global. If I type in global, nothing happens. So if you answer that the answer is global, I need to use a global variable, nothing's going to happen. It's invalid syntax, and therefore I'll count it wrong. You have to specify what variable you want to use. So here, I'm going to get this. Now I can't concatenate because I've got integers and strings, right? So when I pass this in, I stored it as age, global my age in here. I need to convert this over to an integer before I can mess with it. So here I converted my age over to an integer, passed it into age, right? So instead of me passing it in, I no longer have to do that. I would just have to say int my age equals age plus 10. This is now going to be my age. Again, an integer plus 10. Now, if my age is greater than whatever, I would continue that code on. All right, anybody got any questions on local and global scopes? People mess this up all the time. And again, it's on quizzes, it's on exams. All right. We talked about using the global statement and how we can use that. You only need to use the global statement if you intend to manipulate whatever variable that was. If you're just going to read it and never manipulate it, then you don't have to define this at the top. I can just say my age. But if I want to be able to manipulate that outside variable, I must say global my age. All right, so exception handling. You guys have been seeing this so far. If you do some error or some mistake, you're going to see something like this traceback, right? And you guys have seen type error, which means in this case, I cannot concatenate a string and an integer to a string. I have to convert it to a string so that I can concatenate two things together. So when you get those errors and they come back to you, as you can see here, we can say that this was a zero division error in their example. And the error I showed you, it's a type error. So this is going to bring up what's called a try and except clause. So we can try, for example, remember that they're typing in my age as an input here, right? Well, if we assume that they're typing in an integer, so if I say, let me pull this back here, go back to where we were. All right, so I run this program. We're going to assume I'm typing in 22 and the program runs. However, if I type in something else, such as Jason, well, I can't convert that string over to an integer. It's not a number. So right now your program crashes. So to fix that, in this case, we have value error in our code. This is how you guys are going to end up sanitizing code from here on out. So from here on out, I expect you guys to sanitize some code. We'll use something like a while true loop. We're going to put our question inside the while true and say my age and then get that variable in. Now at this point, in order to figure out if it's a integer, we have to say try. We're going to try to convert my age over to an integer. If it doesn't work, we're going to print something like print that is not a valid number. Please try again. If it was valid, then we want to break out of this loop, right? Because we're in a while true loop. And what will happen is, as we run this code, now if I type in gibberish, it's going to tell me to keep trying again, and it starts the loop back over with what's your age. So now they cannot type in anything other than a number. If they type in a number in a letters, it's not going to take it. It will only take it when you type in an integer that can convert over. So does everybody see how to start sanitizing inputs to make sure that they're the input that you wanted? I'm going to try to convert it to an integer, which is what this does. If it works, I break the loop. If it doesn't work, I print them out and say, hey, that's not valid. Try again. Now, the try that we're doing here is pretty simple, where we're just taking their text, converting it to an integer. It either works or it doesn't work. Later on, we could do other ones like, is it a capital letter when they type their name? Is it something else? We can do all those kind of checks. If we said something like, what is your age, right? There's some other things that we may want to check here. So if they type in something like a negative number, well, that's not a valid age, right? It can't be -4. So we would have to say if int my age, right? That's going to check and make sure that it's a number. And then we're going to see if it's greater than or equal to 0, then we'll go ahead and break. Otherwise, we're going to have an else and say print that is not a valid age. Age must be greater than 0, right? And we don't want that to be greater than or equal to, it just needs to be greater than. So now we can really check our code to make sure we get a valid age. So if I get gibberish, it loops me over. If I say -100, it's going to say it's not a valid age. Notice the different error message that we give the user. Say it has to be greater than 0. So now we can say 55 and we get something out of it. So from now on, when you guys ask for something like age, you're going to want to use this type of while loop in order to get that back. Now notice this is several lines of code, right? And we may ask for this age multiple times. So that's when it would make sense to define a function called, say, get age. And we take this entire code and put it up here into get age. Now, anywhere in my code, all I have to do is say my age equals get age. like that. And we want to make sure that we return this code. So instead of a break, we're going to say return my age. Get rid of this guy. We don't need it anymore. And we're going to get rid of this stuff here. So now inside my code, I'm just going to call this function of getAge. When I first run this program, I get hello is what are your age? 22. At that point, we do nothing because we're not printing anything out. But if it was an invalid number, we have all of our sanitization built into that getAge function. So if we say negative 100, if we say anything that's not letters, it's not valid. So in your guys' next homeworks in the midterm, as we're moving towards it, make sure you're cleaning up. I will purposely try to break your code. So if you ask for age and you don't really sanitize it, then you're going to miss points. Should be a valid, should have some kind of restrictions on what the user's typing in. Otherwise, I can break your program. And anytime I get red output from your midterm projects or final projects, it basically crashed your program, which means you don't get any other points past that. So it's real simple. You just double check it. Think of what constraints should be on whatever they're typing in. So say you ask a question like, say your midterm is a text adventure game. And at the very end, you want them to play again. You got to ask them the question, do they want to play again? So we could say something like def play again. And you could say print, do you want to play again? Yes or no. Right? So we're going to get their input and we're going to say response equals input. See what they come in. Okay. Now we got to check to make sure we got valid response. So let's put this inside of a while true loop because we're going to keep repeating until we get an answer that's valid. And off that response, we can say if response equals yes, then we can do whatever we want, right? So we could say print, great, let's start again. Okay, on an elif, now we wouldn't just do else, right? And why would we not do else if we were just checking for yes?
Because that would open up the response to anything.
You got it. So we're not just checking. We asked specifically for a yes or no. This would allow them to type in anything other than yes, which isn't very clean and concise. We ask for a yes or no. We should only get a yes or a no. So we would want to use an elif. And we would say response equals no. Print, thanks for playing. And then we could do something like sys.exit to end our program. Remember that we're going to have to import sys to use that. All right. And now we can have an else that they typed in something else. So we could say print, that is not a valid response. Please try again. All right. If they say yes, then we're going to go ahead and break out of our loop, which means they'll go ahead and continue on our project. So we could say down here, play again. And then we would continue on. So now we're going to say while true, and this is our main loop. This is our whole program. And instead of always ending our program right away, we're just going to keep them in this main loop. So what does this look like? All right. We immediately called my age equals get age. We jumped up here in our code. We're going to execute this code first, get a valid age. So again, we're going to clean it up, make sure we're getting valid ages. All right, 22. Now it says, do you want to play again? Yes or no? If I type in garbage, it says it's garbage and asks us again. If we type in no in lowercase, we get the invalid response. So what we may want to do is check our yeses and nos over here and do a Boolean operator and say and response or actually it'd be an or. Response equals yes in lowercase. And we could also check this one and say, or response equals no. So now we will accept a capital Y or a lowercase y, a capital N or a lowercase n. And if any of those work, right? So no, okay, thanks for playing, and the program ends because it called sys.exit and ended our program. If we said yes, now it's going to start over and ask for a whole new age. Just started this whole program right back over again. And the reason that worked is we put the whole program inside of a while true loop. And at the very end, we ask play again. Anybody have any questions on how try and accepts work, how we can sanitize our input now, or start the whole thing over again, that kind of stuff? So this is a little bit of last week where we talked about using ifs. We're using or Booleans to accept either capital yes or lowercase yes. If we wanted to accept something like all caps, we would have to say or response equals yes in all caps, and we could accept all caps as well. Now soon we will learn that there's a shorthand way of doing all of that. But for now, this is how you guys would be able to sanitize those kind of inputs. So if you're asking for a name, like for example, now, you may want to make sure that it's a minimum of what, 3 characters, right? So how could we check to see if a name is at least 3 characters? Let's create a function for that, get name. And what would we have there? Something like, please enter your name. We're going to say my name equals input. Let's get our input. Now, what do we do to sanitize my name? With the restriction that we want it to be at least 3 characters long.
My name's
Okay. How do we calculate if my name is less than 3? You could, but I don't think that's quite what you're wanting. You want to calculate it to a number based on the length, right? All right. So what function did we learn that would help us calculate the length of something? The len function, right? So we do the len of my name, which gets us back an integer, which then we can calculate to see if that is greater than or equal to 3. In this case, we're going to check to see if it's less than based on the way that you asked it there. So all we have to do is now say, if it's less than, what do we do? There you go. So please make sure something like is at least 3 characters. There again, over here, where we said this wasn't a valid response, and we said, please try again, we should make that error message a little bit better. We should say, please answer yes or no, right? We say try again, even though we told them up above, they should only answer yes or no. We would want to respond, only put yes or no. The cleaner, more concise your programs are, the better your programming is overall. You'll make sure the user is guided to what they should be answering. So here we have, please make sure your name is at least 3 characters long. There we go. Now, what would we do here? Because we want this to start over again, right? And make sure that we're getting valid input. So we should turn this whole thing into a while true loop, right? Remember, while trues are your friends because that's how you can keep them in an infinite loop until they give you the answer you want. Think of it as your significant other asking you what's out for dinner, and they only want their answer, not your answer. All right. So you're going to print this. If we're in a while true loop, how do we start the while true loop over? Continue, right? If it's greater than 3, then what do we want to do? There you go. So else we're going to break out. Now, how else could we have written that little if else statement so that we would not have to have an else break? So that we wouldn't have to have an else. Yeah, you could do it in a try. It's basically flipping this around, right? We decided to use less than. We could say something like greater than. We could error out, or we would still need an else and break. What that would do, though, is flip this around. We would say, okay, that's valid, then break, then do a continue. So what I was getting at there was it depends on how you want to do this as to how you end up doing your responses. Either way is valid. You could say, is it greater than 3? Great, thanks for a valid input, break out of the loop. Then you would need an else that would say something else. Now, is this if completely accurate based on our response to them? If the length of my name is less than 3, then we say, please make sure your name is at least 3 characters. Does that response match our check up above? It doesn't, right? What do we need to change? Less than or equal to, because we say it has to be at least 3 characters long. Okay, so now we got a valid input. We can get their name. And in this case, we're going to return my name back to the end user. So in here, before we get an age, let's call our new function of get name. We're going to say my name equals get name. So now I will have a global variable called my name once it runs this code. If I run this, now we say, please enter a name. And then what's your age? It would do all those checks and we could say yes. And it's going to start that whole program over again. We're just slowly building our program out as we go now. So, you know, at the beginning of this program, we may want something like a welcome. So let's do another function up here called def welcome screen. And we're going to say print, let's do a hashtag. We're going to do that times 60. Print welcome. My computer's done. Like that. We're going to print this out. We'll do welcome screen. Do this before my computer dies here. Sorry about that. Forgot my charger. We could just call welcome screen. So now when we run our program, notice we get our nice little welcome banner. We get this logo. Let's give ourselves an extra space after that just by throwing an extra print in. And now we got a little banner that executes first in our program. Then we're going to call the get name function. Then we call the get age function. Then we call the play again function. But my program is nice and clean now. If I want to deal with something with age, I don't have to go search in my whole code to find it. I know that I can just go to the get age function. If I want to deal with play again, I get with just the get play again function. Normally, you would want to end up doing these in alphabetical order so you could just move them around. That's just a nice thing so you could find it fast and easy. All right. We look back through here, any remaining things, looks like you just got some programs you guys can try in a summary. So that should give you the idea of functions. Try to practice doing some of these projects down below. If I ask that you return or build a function, which is what we'll do here in the future, you must have functions defined in some way. To me, this welcome screen, while it is a function, it's not a very good function, right? All you're doing is just printing out a welcome screen. So when your midterm requires functions, this will count as a function, but I want to see something more like these where you're actually doing something, right? You're calling get a name, you're calculating that name, make sure it's valid, returning that name back. When we start at the very end of this course, we'll start talking about object-oriented programming. Being in the habit of doing something like this is going to make your life a whole lot easier. You're already in the habit of it. We're going to convert that over to object-oriented later. All right. So remember, this week, we go back here and look at this section. You'll read that functions chapter that we just went over. You'll cover quiz 1. And again, we're going to go over that on Thursday, or you guys will take it on Thursday. All you have to do is just double check and read over the content that we already did. Watch the videos. If I said it's in the video, or if I know it's on the quiz, I will have told you it's on the quiz. It's multiple choice and matching question, and just one matching question. All right. When you get the quizzes done, I still have to manually grade those to see if there's something that I messed up and we need to give you points back for. So don't take your grade as the final quiz grade. Note that I need to review that grade to make sure it's valid. Anybody got any questions? All right, no video on Thursday. Obviously, we're taking the quiz.